we do? Hi. Good to see you all. Thanks for having me. What a joy. Kevin Klein for inviting me. Always a pleasure to come down. I think this is the fourth or fifth time I've done this particular session. Looks like we're in middle of construction here at the golf course. I was like, boy, this seems like a lot smaller than the last time I was here. And then I saw the rafters behind. So I'm going to take 10 minutes and do a Cornell commercial. The MGA got a 5-minute. I'm going to take, as an academic, I'm going to take 10 minutes. So big greetings from your land-grant institution here in the state of New York, and also from my colleagues in the other land-grant institutions that touch the metropolitan New York region, and that's Rutgers University, University of Connecticut, University of Rhode Island, UMass. We don't let the Penn State people in here very often, but Kaminsky comes anyway. So, for those of you from Penn State, now you've been officially offended. I never finish a talk without trying to do that at least once. Let me tell you what's going on at Cornell University, and I'll just second Mike's call for the need to pay attention to water quality protection, water use, pollinator habitat. This is just, it's just the best way to do business in New York State and avoid a number of the problems. It's one thing to say you're going to do it. It's another thing to actually do it, and I think that's what we're confronting now, is that we've been saying we're going to do it, and now we're moving towards clubs absolutely implementing. Oh, big shout out to the Wingfoot guys and Wes and Steve Rabideau, not far from here, stopped in for a visit, and they had a nice BMP, oh, you can't use these pointers on these screens, nice BMP placard hanging from an old picture from West number 2. So happy when it's promoted and you walk in and see it, even in the trailers that those poor guys are housed in currently. Also, big thanks for the many years, 20 years now, I've been working with the state of New York's Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historical Preservation, and the New York State IPM program at the Bethpage State Park, and the 15 state golf courses that we've collected 10 years of environmental risk data associated with their pest management programs. And we can honestly say, because we've got the EIQ data from almost every major over the last several years, we can honestly say we're about half the environmental risk of almost every other major for relative to their pesticide use. So we've really aspired to a high level of environmental quality at the state park, and I know you've recognized Andy for that at this meeting in the past. Okay, let me take a minute and scare you, because this is about, most of you that know me, that bio is a bit old. I'm actually at Cornell almost 24 years now. And I can tell you, in my 30 years since I got my Ph.D., this is about the scariest time I can remember for chemical use. And I'm not even sure how many people are paying attention to it. But when I wake up in the middle of the night on the road and you see a lawyer looking for people who sprayed Roundup or glyphosate, it gets your attention. In fact, 11,200 lawsuits, class action suits have been brought, not 11,200 class action suits, 11,200 plaintiffs have now joined suit to sue Bayer, now the owner of Monsanto, and the glyphosate molecule. And the interesting thing about this, as I draw you to the research that we use for alternatives on this, is that I was in California speaking in Palm Springs about 2.5 weeks ago, and while I was there, California's the hotbed of this, I was standing next to a distributor rep for a very large national distributor that just went public with their particular dilemma regarding the sale of glyphosate, and that is they won't sell it any longer because they can't find an insurance company to insure their sale of that product. So ultimately, it's not even going to be the regulatory environment. It may in fact be the cost of doing business. Now, of course, glyphosate has wide use beyond our industry, and in fact, in this room, I mean, if I asked you to raise your hand on a golf course, I bet you most of you don't use a half a gallon of that thing a whole year, probably in the bunkers or in the driveway or in places where you actually don't want things to grow. You get into the lawn and landscape business with flower beds and stuff like that, it becomes much more widely used. All right. In response to that, or before that, we were fortunate for many years to develop a relationship with Jeff Carlson and the organic golf course out at the Vineyard Golf Club. And they recently have been funding a study looking at crabgrass control without chemicals. Now, you'd think this problem was solved, and maybe corn gluten meal will do it. And in the end of the day, there are virtually no materials that provide effective selective control of weeds on a golf course. We have very few that will provide selective control that are not chemicals. We have virtually nothing available. And so the membership there funded a 3-year graduate student project that I want to show you what slash and burn actually looks like. We've gone in and adapted a technology from road work called phrase mowing. And we go in and literally tear off the surface of the ground and at the same time harvest the weed seed population. We've also found a way to solve that championship tee problem that 2 guys use 3 times a year. You know that championship tee? You guys are arguing about the intermediate rough. How come everybody keeps fertilizing that back tee when nobody uses it? Why does it keep getting fed every time the spray rig goes out with nitrogen and no one uses it? Because it creates beautiful thatch. This is thatch that Joe Lucas at Saratoga National is exceptionally proud of creating. And the normal way to go would be to core it and sand it and make it miserable for 5 or 6 years until the USGA is satisfied you poked enough holes. Yes, we count holes now per unit area, that you can manage that thatch. I say shred it off in one fell swoop and seed into it with some of the varieties that might not get you into that same amount of trouble. Now, our approach has been to take out the weed seed bank. And we've taken out about 90% of it if we go down 3/4 of an inch. What's left, we bought a poultry floor sanitizer that they use to sanitize the floors of poultry farms. And we're scorching the earth with 2,000 degrees of propane, and now starting to look at it as an alternative for vegetation control even in fescue area, high grass areas. So a lot of our work is targeted at that weed seed bank, and you'll be surprised how quickly your options go away when the chemicals go away. Now this glyphosate's not necessarily going to impact this, but I'm working with a golf course that hasn't used a synthetic chemical besides Celiprin on a few greens at all in 14 years. So big thanks to the Vineyard Golf Club for funding that particular work. What else are we doing at Cornell? Well, we, like many of the rest of our industry, have become very data-driven, right? The impact of analytics on sports, the impact of analytics on our lives is getting bigger. Why shouldn't it hit our industry? We've been doing a lot of soil mapping these days, interpreting them with new ways of looking at you have nutrient deficiencies, looking at sustainable nutrition versus, you know, how much do I need because the soil test said that needs calibration says I need the nutrients. So a lot of mapping work to try to drive down nutrient use, work with GPS sprayers that are more refined and at least can spray to the geometry of your golf course, and we're seeing in some of our work 23% reductions in product cost and product use just by spraying the geometry of your property more accurately. And of course we imagine a world, right, much like agriculture, that a lot of these things are connected, and then of course that paves the way for my favorite topic that aggravates almost everybody, automation. Right? I don't know how, I wasn't here for the labor talk, but I'm sure it wasn't a rosy picture. I'm sure we're looking at new ways of being more efficient, and we're looking for new places to get students. Right? We see FFAs and we see non-traditional outdoor activities as ways of attracting people to this business, but until then, and hopefully our work with data-driven processes will lead to a more efficient operation. Okay. So I have a video I want to show you because I think I made it to the title of my talk finally. All right. And I guess the best way to do it, let me do this. This is a very slow motion video of Ricky Fowler striking a putt. Ball doesn't roll. The camera's too damn good. The problem is the surfaces are good, the cameras are good. Golfers are in their heads, and they think shoes are the problem. So let's talk about what we've been trying to do at Cornell to understand this a little bit better. Well, one of the things we've been trying to do is, can we measure whether a green is smooth? And I know this has been a big debate, and because you can see something, does it feel like it's actually happening? So we've experimented with a device called the perimeter. We've experimented with just about every device you can use to measure this. And have interacted with the people that we think have the way to do it now, but it's not easy and it's not inexpensive. This is a device that takes advantage of the GPS, the gyroscope in your iPhone. You put it on top of this device that the ball hangs from, and it's a crude way to look at the way the ball moves up and down and side to side, right? There's three forces of energy. There's three forces of energy when a ball starts to roll. There's the forward movement, the side to side movement, and the up and down movement, right? And so, deflection is a part of understanding the way the ball tracks to the hole. Now, we've tried children's toys, we've tried the perimeter, I've tried asking golfers, the STRI has a wobble meter and the things that they use. The best thing out there right now is two scientific papers that when I have a hard time sleeping, these are the kinds of papers I like to read. This student working with Sean Askew at Virginia Tech took this particular robotic putting device, and before he even did it, he tested all the tools we currently use to measure green speed, all the tools we might use to measure smoothness, and then measured the density and parameters of about 15 different golf balls, just to make sure there wasn't variability in the golf ball. And one of the fascinating things he did was he struck the ball and then put a force plate with a piece of pressure paper on it so that the ball struck it, right? The putt went and the ball struck it. Now, one of the arguments against my great friends in the USGA, and I've known Dave, gosh, as long as I've been upright, right, Dave? We know each other a long time. And so this isn't criticism, but one of the ways we measure speed that came out in this particular study tends to have this thing called a legacy effect, right? Drop the ball tracks. So when they tested whether that was a good way to measure ball roll, they put this piece of pressure paper at the end of a 15-foot, I think they let it roll about, maybe it's 3 feet before it hit this pressure plate. And they either brushed the line where the ball went or didn't brush the line. They rolled a number of balls over the line, they kept putting it, and sometimes they brushed it, they brushed the grass so that any legacy effect could go away, and sometimes they just let the ball continue to roll without brushing the grass, right? And then they looked at the spread of how the ball hit the pressure plate. On one side is when they didn't brush, right? And you can see how narrow the place is where the plate gets hit with the ball, which implies it's continually going in the same track. Okay? Now the other one where they do come and brush after every ball is rolled, you see how it spreads more? See the spread on that? If you can see it, it's very cryptic. It's just little black things where the ball's hitting. So we're getting good at determining this. So you ask scientists to measure something, we'll figure out a way to do it. I don't know if any of this is pertinent, whether you make a putt or not, or how much a golf shoe impacts what you're going to do, but we can measure it. And I worry, to a certain extent, that we've unleashed the hounds here in trying to get smoothness, right? Barely able to test it, and now we've got, tapping greens and things like that. So you have to use this as a backdrop, right? Because ultimately, what's driven this is the perception. People are seeing things on their putting greens, and they, oh, my putting, they can't shoot up. Oh, look at it. Can't make a putt, right? Looks like, they just had a football game between here and the whole location. So let's look at that for a second. Mark Brody, the sort of inventor of stroke gain, the Columbia University professor, actually looked at ShotLink data and amateur data, and I'm sure most of you may know this, but how often does a golfer, let's start with the PGA Pro, how often does a PGA Pro make a 8-foot putt in one stroke? 90%. 75. 40. Well, Brody says 50%. The data from ShotLink says they miss it every other time, right? How about the average golfer? What do you think the 92 handicap, not 92 handicap, the guy who shoots 92 handicap, the guy who shoots 92, what do you think they make? How often does an amateur average golfer, you're about shooting in the 90s, make? How often? 25%, right? 25%. All right. So, what did I hear a golf course tell me? I can't manage this place around your inability to play the game. You ever hear that line? I can't manage this golf course around your inability to play this game. Right? Move a rock, take a tree, fix the green. So, I want to be very clear about this before I tell you a darn thing about shoes. Get it out of your head. Right? It's in your head. And part of it is you can see it. And part of it, as Gene said, or I'm sorry, as the person who introduced me said, we're getting better we're getting good at providing really good putting surfaces, right? Really good at it. All right, so let's talk about shoes for a second. We finally made it to shoes. Finally made it to shoes, after all that. So how do I want to approach this in the rest of my time with you? We'll do a little bit of history and why we have golf shoes, and we have golf shoes for traction, right? Swing dynamics, right? In fact, we know now, if you swing the club really hard, you play better golf. You don't even have to hit it straight anymore. Just hit it far. All the guys that are winning, they're hitting as far as they can possibly hit it. They're not even valuing accuracy until they play the US Open, of course, and then you see what happens there. And then, of course, our part of this, it's not just, the golf-specific footwear is designed for traction. We have now surfaces that are much more intensely maintained than they used to be, and at a higher level. And a lot of it is much like a horse. I did some work at Saratoga Racetrack, and forever they were mowing the grass track at 5.5, 6 inches before the races. And they were having big problems with divoting, and the horses didn't like it. And I said, hey, let's get some turf density. Let's start cutting it lower. So they went from keeping it at 5 inches to keeping it at 3 inches. That the horses would get on the track, and now they could see the divots. They hated it. We had to raise the height back up so they actually couldn't see what was happening on the ground because they were worried about putting their foot down. You wouldn't think golfers would be like horses, but to a certain extent I think they are. I've been on a few setup crews at the US Open. I'll talk a little bit about this in a second. This isn't what that looks like on a morning before the event. Dave's laughing because he's been there. But this is the way, golf was initially started, right? You see, hard to know what the footwear was, but eventually these things came along, right? These things came along. And revolutionized it, right? You could plant your feet, and you could swing as hard as you wanted to, and felt like you didn't have to move. And in fact, at the same time, our conditioning has improved. These are the kinds of conditions. That putting green probably back then was maybe mowed at 3/16 of an inch. Maybe. And if it rolled 7.5 feet, you were lucky, right? Back in the 40s and 50s, maybe a couple of places in Pittsburgh, they were a little bit faster with the cement blocks they were putting on the mowers when they were cutting them. But ultimately, the demise of the metal spike came for 2 reasons that have nothing to do with the golf course. Well, I think 3 reasons. One is we made it easy to swap them on and off. I think that was a critical thing. Show up, we'll slip these new ones on your stupid shoes. Those little dress shoes you used to wear. But really, the demise of the spike shoe was because of the wooden areas that spikes wear out and the carpets in the clubhouses that people were walking in with their metal spikes. So ultimately, people started to look at this and say, we're going through the wood, we're going through the carpet. This soft spike it looks pretty easy. 20 years ago, we looked at it. And probably just 20 years ago, we weren't mowing at the heights and doing the things that we're doing now. And boy, do we like to measure stuff, right? Now we have analytics for your swing, so I can know, does this shoe improve my swing? And we know that if you have the right shoe on, you can generate more club head speed, and then you put the analytics in your phone, and how far you hit, and what's your percentage of hitting it this way, and we go completely nuts with data, right? We go completely nuts. And so, every year, $600 million is spent around the world on golf shoes. And the FootJoy company in particular is the one based in Brockton, Mass. that I've been working with for the last 3.5 years on this project. And essentially their market is about 40% out, 55, 60% outside of the United States and about 40% in the United States. And a fair amount of it, as you might imagine, is in Southeast Asia. They sell a fair amount of golf shoes down there. So this is big business. And we see the way we swing. Here's the classic swing, the Jack Nicklaus swing. You see the weight moving down and back, right? The forces where the traction has to kick in. You see how that leg is planted. I'm a terrible golfer. But I can know how the forces and energy are there that you have to design a shoe to work to maximize club head speed. And then you've got today's golfers who are barely on the ground when they hit the ball. Look at Bubba Watson's feet as he launches one of his drives. On both of his toes, look at how Dustin Johnson is out here on the edge of his foot, right? So they're using it to cork, right, to sort of coil themselves, and then uncoil so the energy gets transferred completely across. And I'll tell you candidly, this is how golf shoes are designed. This is what they're designed to do. Okay, so you have really good traction golf shoes, right? And you have golf course superintendents with phones and social media. And so golf course superintendents started to take pictures and say, hey, what's this? Look at this, I found a metal spike. I haven't seen that in a while. You know, Brian, a local person, was saying the twist is the problem. Do you wear these golf shoes and this is the damage you'll leave on your putting surface? Don't you think companies love when their products are denounced publicly with pictures and brand names? When you work closely with businesses that have to confront this kind of social media onslaught, they're at a loss. And so that's how we started our relationship with FootJoy. Now let me tell you a very funny story recently, and I wonder if David was there on the other side of this story. And I wonder if you can actually tell me this happened or not. I've had the pleasure of becoming friendly with a lot of golf course superintendents, work on many crews over the years for a variety of tour and championship events. I'm a geek, I don't mind getting up in the morning, and I'm absolutely fascinated with these high quality services to see what we can do. So I get up in the morning and I join the setup crew, and I do a job. You know, these are the kinds of things in our business. There's 15 guys for one job, right? There's 15 guys to like hold the cup, hold the holder, hold the flag. So my job is to make sure the flag's on the pin and screw the thing, and then I stand off on the side because, as David and Paul will attest, there's enough people walking around that putting green before the U.S. Open starts. I'm on the front side, what we call the non-revenue generating side of the U.S. Open, helping the setup crew, and I'm standing afar, and I'm watching the leadership. In this case, this was a picture taken on the other side of the setup, but the guy on the left is Nick Price. So when everyone first gets to a green, and you're there with the setup crew, and everybody's putting around trying to figure out where the whole location is going to go, everybody introduces themselves, and many of you know me a long time. I lack a filter. My wife really is trying to work on me with this for many years now. And so I walk up to Nick Price, and I look down, and I say, what the hell are you doing with those shoes? And I proceeded to say, why are you standing on the green with those shoes? So here are these beautiful surfaces that the staff at Shinnecock produced. As good as you're going to get. I mean, 13 feet on a pretty regular basis, nice and firm, right? And, you know, I'm not talking about the calamity that ensued. I'm talking about the quality of these playing surfaces being so high that just these knobby shoes caused this damage. Now, I heard when he went on the other side the next day, he was standing off to the side, and he said, I heard he said to somebody, that guy on the front side yelled at me the day before the next day. So I probably was me. Anyway, we also survey golf course superintendents. And we say, hey, how much do you know about shoes? Can you tell us how impressive they are? We've conducted surveys with about 300 golf course superintendents in public presentations over the years. And we stand up there and we show them 3 shoes. A spikeless shoe and 2 soft spike shoes. Right? And we say, which ones are the most damaging and the least damaging, right? And then we've gone and tested these things, and I'll give you the reveal here a little bit at the end. In general, we get resounding, oh, that spikeless Pro SL, the #1 selling shoe in golf, by the way, is the least damaging. Oh man, look at those cleats on that right one. That's the, that FootJoy, that's the worst one. And really, nothing to say about the middle shoe, and yet when we tested it, the middle shoe was the most damaging. In fact, the shoe on the right, well, my right, I'm looking at this thing, yes, I think it is your right, the FootJoy on your right, had actually the least amount of damage, even compared to the spikeless shoe. So be careful, just be careful. I like that, there's this, hey, what about our surfaces? And hey, what about these shoes? And hey, we should be asking these questions, but we want to, be careful we get some data to determine how we do this. So I think I have another video, a couple of videos. A couple of slow motion videos of a couple of putts. Now, can you see? I know this might be difficult to see, but I don't know if you can see the spike marks in between where the ball is and where the hole is. Can you? The guys are maybe up front can see it. So let me see if I can get this. Let's see if I can get this. Is it going to let me do it? It's a slow motion video. I don't know if it's going to let me do it. Oh, there it goes. Yeah. All right. Watch. It's going to be slow motion. I'm sure you can see the cup in the distance for those of you who can see. Just slowing it down so you can get a real look at what happens. Now the putt on the left, actually, you see the hopping? Look at all that bouncing up and down, right? But if you look at it tracking, okay, is he going to make it? He's not going to make it. That one's going to miss, all right? Now how about this one? The same over the area, slow-mo, and you're going to watch a ball go right through a massive spike mark, and watch what happens. All right, so it goes right over that spike mark right there, and now it's tracking, and is it going to go in? And in fact, it goes in. Okay? We have to be very careful about the way we talk about spike marks and golf shoes. If you hit the putt right, and I don't know about the rules, if you hit the putt right and it's tracking on a good line, it may look like it deflects, and maybe there's a time when it actually does, but our experience has been that if you strike that putt right, a spike mark's not going to make you miss it. That's the dirty little secret about shoes from the beginning. All right, so to test shoes, as a scientist, we had to come up with a method. In fact, I have a graduate student who published a master's thesis on this particular topic, and it's the jig, right? It is a counted number of steps that happens around the whole location, where studies have shown since the 50s, about 85% of the golf traffic occurs on a modern golf course, right? And there's been work on golf shoes since the 30s and in the 50s and in the 70s, and of course 20 years ago when soft spikes came around. So we had to have a method to test it and then determine if it worked. And what we've been able to continually reproduce is this really uniform traffic pattern that we can put shoes on different people and test how the traffic turns out. We're able to reproduce it on a large scale. This is a drone image of some of our large scale work, and when it gets wet, it's even more obvious. So to be able to take the noise out of the method, we had to sort of refine the method to know how to do this, and then ultimately determine what should we measure that matters to a golf course superintendent and a golfer, right? What are the things that matter? So first of all, we start this study when we have at least 10.5 feet ball roll distance. We have a particular turf quality. We're free of stress, and we have a certain firmness that we believe is where we want, where we want to be at the time. So we have a number of parameters that are very simple to measure that we're developing a putting surface performance index to use. Okay, so we have done a fair amount of work. We have been at this for 3 years, driving people crazy, generating data like crazy, trying to determine what's the role of the person, what's the role of the kind of putting surface you do it on, what's the role of the shoe design, what's the role of the maybe rolling plays on this. All right, the data a lot of the pictures you're going to see, a lot of the pictures you're going to see moving forward are images we analyze digitally for damage. And we do that by enclosing the area, taking the digital image, and then scanning it. This has been a very easy way to take quantifiable data. So I'll just show you some pictures of what happens on a bent grass surface when 4 different people wear the Pro SL. 4 different people walking on a bent grass surface where we didn't move the whole location for 7 straight days. And they did that jig that my student was just walking in there. And you can see the dramatic differences in the people wearing the same shoe, different people causing different amounts of injury. In fact, you'll see that bottom right-hand person is smaller, right? And also causing a fair amount of damage right at the hole location. And then others barely looks like they've walked there at all. Now we've also done this work on annual bluegrass putting surfaces. And again, we see the same sorts of things. Depends on who's walking, determines how much damage, even on a spikeless shoe. So again, you see the big person on the top left, damage, and again, the smaller person on the bottom right. So we started to work with our performance design apparel lab, who just works with the fire departments and military industries to design comfortable shoes, because you gotta wear shoes if you're a fireman, and you gotta wear your boots if you're in battle, and they have to be comfortable. And so they test these things all the time, and we've done a fair amount of assessing of the human condition relative to walking, putting pressure plates in. And oddly enough, we had 7 different people in 3 different shoes, and I believe I can get it. You should be able to see. You should be able to see the pressure plates there start to move. As a person walks, you look where the red dot goes to where the pressure is landing. Now we're using some of this data in helping determine what's the best way to improve green friendliness, right? But one of the things we learned from 7 people in 4 different shoes is you need to test about 200 people if you're going to try to take the variability out of a person. So, let me leave you with this. We figured out 2 things here. One is, when we test shoes, every person has to wear every shoe every time there's a traffic event every day to randomize the people through it. And the second thing we learned was creeping bentgrass doesn't really hold up as well to this intense traffic as much as annual bluegrass. Right? So for those that may have been debating annual bluegrass, creeping bentgrass, obviously annual bluegrass presents enormous risks with potential for ice damage and potential for anthracnose and summer injury, summer disease problems. But if you've got a golf factory, if you've got a place that's grinding through golf, especially there's a number of places not far from here that have annual bluegrass surfaces in general, we have found consistently over 3 years of study that annual bluegrass holds up better than creeping bentgrass under more intense traffic. Under lighter traffic, the differences don't compare as much. Now we've done some clipping work, and one of the things our clipping work revealed is completely opposite of what everybody else is finding relative to traffic. Our work shows traffic winds up increasing clipping volumes, or clipping weights. So we looked at this a little closer, and you see it happens. We're putting out 140 rounds a day for 7 straight days, and we're mowing every day after that. And you see where the increasing numbers go where we put the traffic. Now, when you look real close at this, when you look more closely at this, where you step and turn and twist, we get a bit of lifting. You get a little bit of lifting. Now, shoe design people are looking at designing materials in the shoe that don't grab the grass as aggressively as some of the shoes do now. And one of the things this did was it caused tufts that the next day would require, when we mowed, we were harvesting that sort of lifted turf from the traffic. And that's where the clipping volume increase came from, and a direct result of where you see the damage. And I can tell you, these are really firm, really verticut greens. They're not ones with long runners. This is what happens when intense traffic and the twisting of those shoes. All right, let me summarize where we are today so you can get a better picture of maybe leaving here with an understanding of what's going on. Our last batch of work has actually looked at testing barefoot walking. We've looked at cross shoe footwear, course and on-course and off-course footwear, the FootJoy Comfort Fit, not the Comfort Fit, the black one on the bottom there with the knobs. I don't know the name of it. But it's got I'll talk about it, it's got that bottom like Nick Price had on the shoe I yelled at him about. And of course we did a metal spike included as well. We set up a study where we tried to compare firm, fast, dry, rolled surfaces to moist, put the water on in the morning so you don't have to hand water during the day, don't roll, right? Green speeds in the 9.5 foot range, so sort of maybe daily feed, not have the labor resources to prepare the surfaces the same way, and championship conditions. And then the rain came. this year that I'm sure many of you saw. We got 3 times normal rainfall. So all we have different now is a rolled surface versus a not rolled surface. Now, the thing about metal spikes you got to keep in mind is, and I know that the USGA work that just got published last year that the guys in Arkansas and Tom Nicolai have been working on revealed this as well, but one of the benefits you get from these shoes is they actually can have an ironing effect when it's wet. In fact, when you start looking at, after 1 day of traffic, you see in the top left is the metal spike, the Pro SL in the top right, that sort of clubhouse shoe to the bottom left, and a spiked shoe to the bottom right, plastic spiked shoe to the bottom right. Here it is after about 5 days of not moving the whole location, and you can start to see the moisture start to build. Again, the metal spike shoe holding up pretty good when you neutralize the humid effect. And then after 7 days and all that rain, you can start to see the dramatic impact that some of the shoes have. But you gotta walk on these things quite a bit to start to get this kind of damage. And one of the things that we found, there's 2 things we found here that were interesting. One is when we set a sort of green speed, okay, here's the green speed you're gonna get, average green speed with traffic, and that's the black line in the middle, right? The average overall green speed when you traffic a green. And then each of those bars is what the shoe did when we, to the ball roll distance, when we rolled the ball through that hole location. You can see some of them actually increased ball roll distance, like the clubhouse shoe, that has more of an ironing effect sometimes. And even the metal spike shoe, you see a slight increase. But what you don't see is a change in ball roll distance that a golfer can detect. Right? It's not really ever greater than 6 inches, maybe. That 5% is the 6-inch mark. The other thing we noticed is there was a big difference between rolling and not rolling. And that really determined where the metal spike shook out. We got generally a lot more damage from metal spikes when we didn't roll. And we also got more damage from metal spikes when it was drier. Metal spikes were more lubricated when it was wet and worked their way in and out better. The outsoles, the plastic spikes, as it got wet, their traffic got worse. But in general, one of the ways I would tell every golf course superintendent, every greens chairman here, rolling your surfaces on a regular, routine basis is critical, not just for playing surface performance, but for holding up to the traffic as well. And I believe it would only second what the USGA concluded from some of the work that Nicolai and Karcher and Richardson have been doing throughout the country, where they said sand top dressing also was a major factor improving traffic tolerance. So we've come a long way in sort of understanding this particular issue. This is some traffic under dry conditions. We accelerated the rate a little bit. And again, you can see when you have really good conditions, you don't get the same kind of damage as when you get wet conditions. So, in conclusion, the shoes matter, and I'm telling you that the golf footwear industry, at least FootJoy, that doesn't sell shoes in soccer and doesn't sell shoes in football and doesn't sell shoes in baseball, they have a vested interest in making sure they have a good golf shoe. So they are continuing to work with us and support some of our work, allowing us to do some management work as well. But what we've concluded is, if you've got the wrong person on the wrong day on a wet surface, in the wrong shoe for them, it's hard to just implicate the shoe currently. The type of shoe, the type of surface you're playing on matters. Obviously rolling matters, and what the best thing for us is, if we can get the footwear industry to sort of embrace this method and standardize the way they test, our goal now is to determine how to take what we've learned in the field and bring it into more rapid assessments in an apparel testing lab, so they can more rapidly test how the shoes are going to interact with the surface. So with that, I'll thank you again for inviting me. If there's maybe a minute for questions, I can take them. And so let's just leave it at that. Questions? That's okay. It's really quiet. How are we doing? Are we late?
true statement to say that almost having different types of shoes with different types of golfers will almost have a sort of like a negative effect and affect the area so that, you know, one shoe is gonna maybe raise it, one shoe is gonna keep it down, but a variety of shoes might negate the negative effect of the shoe?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm assuming so here's what I'm gonna try to think you asked. I think you asked, because people and shoes differ so much, will they neutralize each other?
Thank you.
I couldn't say really whether they would neutralize each other, but I will say in general, we're going to test different round volumes, right? I mean, we want to see based on golf playable hours. Our study for this year is, you know, you don't have the same playable hours during the season, so we're going to look at playable hours impacted by weather. We're going to try to get an understanding of when you actually start to see damage. You know, is it 200 rounds when, you know, on this kind of a day, and understand it better that way. But I can tell you honestly, and you know, this could get me. Here's what I can tell you. They've designed shoes for reasons that don't include green friendliness. They've designed shoes to let you swing hard. Only because superintendents have started to call them out are they starting to ask questions about the kinds of damage that occurs and be a little bit smarter about the way they design them. So some of it is, I would say, we're seeing this issue because the surfaces are better. And some of it is that the shoes actually got more aggressive. And to be honest, if you look at ground pressure, that Pro SL, that spikeless Pro SL, has the most surface area in contact with the ground. And if the pros wear that shoe, and you look at the torque those guys are generating, and it's a spikeless shoe. So I don't know the specific answer to your question, but I think we know now what we don't know. How about that for a domino?
A heavy fellow walking on a soft green, wearing some sort of a cleated shoe, is going to make quite a mark on that green. Now the green comes back, like the mark goes away. When that next group comes up to the green, will that marks and everything, will it have healed by then?
No, not by the next time the guy gets there. No, so the question is, if some heavyset person is playing in front of you and maybe makes some marks in the green, will they come back before you get there? It's unlikely. It's unlikely. And in fact, the bigger the person, the smaller the foot, the more the damage. It's been our experience. So many of you can find when you're playing behind someone that doesn't help. But I don't know, I'm going to just say this one more time. If you missed a putt, it's not because of that spike mark. I'm absolutely convinced. Thank you very much.